PM and Treasurer seem dead set against acquiescing to the calls from the Victorian government for federal assistance during this lockdown. But a second week of a 7-day lockdown and we have had an abrupt about-face for political purposes, you'd suspect. But it's not as simple as when everyone locked down was getting paid in JobKeeper. If you have $10,000 of cash, you can't get this payment. It's less than the minimum wage. And so it's effectively means tested. The MP who represents the Sydney Northern Beach is not happy this morning when he spoke to Tom Connell at the prospect Melbourne is getting support when the Northern Beaches in Sydney did not in January during a lockdown.
It's hard to say no to people, but I'm really disappointed as businesses in my area were not, particularly in the restaurant, the catering, the accommodation area, were not given any assistance over Christmas, which was their peak period. I mean, there'll be a lot of people in my area wondering what's going on.
So it's not fair?
I think they will be saying it's not fair.
Mackellar Liberal MP Jason Falinski, what the PM is setting here is a system for future lockdowns. He wants the Commonwealth Chief Medical Officer, Paul Kelly, to be able to define when lockdown support is necessary. In this way, the Commonwealth can potentially get greater control over when economies are locked down. It's what I advocated earlier in the week. Morrison wants the states to go 50-50, but we had some resistance from the acting Victorian Premier James Merlino to that this morning.
It would be unreasonable to discount that support. Business support is a direct responsibility of the state government, and whether it's last year or the $500 million of support for this particular outbreak, we are meeting our responsibility. In terms of income support for workers, for Victorian workers during this outbreak, that is a responsibility of the federal government. I would be disappointed if we see yet another responsibility that is solely with the Commonwealth walking away from that. That would disappoint me.
Given there are only 3 new cases and they are all linked in Melbourne today, should this be happening? Because should there be a 7-day lockdown at all? 3 linked cases today in Melbourne, like not many cases. Is your personal view that maybe they don't need to lock down for another 7 days, or is that the view of the Commonwealth CMO as well?
The Commonwealth CMO has confirmed to me that hotspot arrangement will be in place, he expects, for the next 7 days. I want to see kids get back to school. I want to see people be able to go back to work and to do that safely. And, those case numbers, as you say, Andrew, they've come down, and that's much better than the alternative, I can assure you. And that's great. That's great. So let's hope that continues and people can get back to work, and importantly, kids can get back to school.
The PM plans to take his plan around funding of these payments and funding of business support to National Cabinet tomorrow.
Could you please remind us what the Commonwealth hotspot definition is, and when you talk to the states about this proposal tomorrow, is it a take it or leave it from you, or you would better be more flexible, given that James Merlino didn't sound too happy just a little while ago?
I'll refer you to the official definition of the Commonwealth hotspot definition, the number of cases on average over a number of days. I think it's 10 average per day over 3 days, off the top of my head. But on the other matter, look, this is, I think, a very sensible and fair proposal. I've already had the opportunity to discuss it with some other premiers who consider either approach is a reasonable way to do with this. It's using a very, I think, practical mechanism to get the job done, and whether we do it by sharing both costs of both payments, or we apportion each payment, one to the states, one to the Commonwealth. I think they're practical ways of doing it. I don't think they need to be issues of controversy or conflict. I think we can just sort it out.
3 cases a day is not the typical hotspot definition that he just mentioned, 10 cases a day over 3 days. A new line here too from the PM at this press conference, that we have nothing to fear.
Resilience, strength, character, determination. That's what beats a virus. Never fear.
Shades of US President Franklin D. Roosevelt during the Great Depression, when there was a run on the banks.
So first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Once again, an issue Labor has been advocating on, taken up by the PM, allowing Labor no other form of attack than what took you so long.
For more than a week, thousands of Victorian businesses and workers have lived with no income and no hope of federal support. Last week, a senior minister told them to go to Centrelink, even though there was no help available. Today, the Prime Minister has finally announced some support. Prime Minister, what took you so long?
The announcement I made prior to question time today, Mr Speaker, is a standard arrangement, Mr Speaker, as I learnt when I was in New Zealand earlier this week. And after 7 days, Mr Speaker, New Zealand, which has also been a very successful country in dealing with lockdowns, support payments commence after 7 days for post-7 days lockdown. We believe that is a responsible thing to do, to provide a support payment to those, Mr Speaker, for lockdowns that go beyond 7 days. But the much better outcome, I've got to tell you, Mr Speaker, is that lockdowns do not go on beyond 7 days. The much better outcome, Mr Speaker, is that students can go back to school, that people can go back to work, Mr Speaker, and that they can do that safely, Mr Speaker.